Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian.
And I'm Kat Spada, and this season, our feminist media criticism is the expression of our souls through computer networks.
Because this is the season of Cyberpunk.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Terrell.
The new millennium, this is amazing, will bring a new experience.
How do you fit all that in your head anyway?
I had to dump a chunk of long-term memory.
This is gonna be fun, Terry.
Who is this?
Take this thing out of the case and stick it up your nose.
Mozart's Ghost, the hottest band on the internet!
This week, we are discussing Ghost in the Machine, a 1993 horror sci-fi film from director Rachel Talalay. Karen Allen plays the intended victim of a serial killer who, after his own death, remains alive by way of his soul being transferred into a computer where he can continue his killing spree using objects connected to the internet, but also the electrical grid, just because same. The film's title is a reference to the philosophical concept introduced by Gilbert Ryle in 1949 to describe René Descartes' mind-body dualism. The Ghost in the Machine theme has inspired Stephen King's The Dark Tower, the manga and anime Ghost in the Shell, and a 1981 album by The Police. Before Ghost in the Machine, director Rachel Talalay produced Hairspray and Crybaby for John Waters, who officiated her wedding, by the way. I just found that fun. And her follow-up to this film was none other than Tank Girl.
Authorities are now saying that a local man in a car accident may have been the killer they've been hunting for the last 3 years.
5 seconds to total scan.
What is it?
This storm keeps surging the power.
We're losing him. He's dying.
Come on!
Last night, a killer died.
Joining us to discuss this film is a comedian, podcaster, and acclaimed rapper, founder of the Stony Island Audio Podcast Network and host of the show What Had Happened Was. He's released dozens of studio albums and EPs, blended stand-up and music on Comedy Central, and previously podcasted about everything from pro wrestling to the animated series Adventure Time. Welcome back to the show, Open Mike Eagle.
Hello, why'd you all do this to me?
No.
Make you sound cooler than you are?
No, it's not what I'm talking about.
So Anita
done that, but
she opened up her address book. She has an analog address book that's stuffed with Post-it notes, and she just like pointed at your name. And we were like, let's watch Ghost in the Machine.
With a digital scanner connected to a murderer.
Yes, 100%. Nice. That's exactly how this happened.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm assuming no one has watched this movie before, or maybe had never even heard of it. Am I correct in this assumption?
I thought it was Ghost in the Shell.
Yes, I knew it. And in the email I sent about this, I was like, not Ghost in the Shell. I was like, Mike's going to pick the anime and think that this is the anime, and
Absolutely
it's not.
Did. Absolutely.
And I purposely didn't pick Ghost in the Shell because I didn't want to, I just didn't feel like talking about the
whole
bullshit
thing.
Yeah, the race of the casting. Like, I just kind of was like, nope. But every time I mentioned this movie, everyone would be like, Ghost in the Shell, and I was like, no, it's a different movie. So Mike has never seen this movie before. Kat, had you?
Never heard of it. I did watch, not by accident, but just because I also watched like a little bit of the anime, thinking they might be like thematically similar, but they're very different beasts. So
I literally picked this from a list of cyberpunk movie lists, and it was like a killer's consciousness enters a computer, and I was like, yes, that's what we have to do. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, I've seen that Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons where, but other than that, no.
So this movie has like 11% on Rotten Tomato. It did not make back its budget in the box office, even remotely. And it is so good. It is such a good fucking movie. I can't wait for us to dive into it and hear how you all thought about it. But I was like, it started and I was like, man, this credit sequence is really good, actually. Like, this looks really dope. And then like, there's all these like practical effects that were really good. And I just like the whole time I was like, wow, this is really holding up. Like, I'm surprised that it like the movie knew what it was and it did what it was doing. And so, yes, there are thematic things that I find troubling and representation things that I find troubling. But like as a whole, I was very surprised because I am not a horror person. I'm not really into like cheesy movies. And this like hit a spot for me.
Now, Mike, I don't know you. I can't read your expressions, but they are. I'm dying to know.
I think you're reading me spot on. Yeah, no, I you know, as Anita was talking, I thought she was being sarcastic at first, and then I realized she was being serious. I could not have had a more opposite reaction and experience watching this movie. I think this movie is really bad. I think it's like super bad. Like I think it's like
so you're in the 11% Rotten Tomato category.
I think 11% is too high.
Oh,
I think it should have single digits at best. Like this isn't, to me, this isn't one of those movies where it's like, oh, it's so bad it's good, or they were trying to like do a thing. I think.
Did you actually watch the whole thing?
Of course.
I don't know. You might have been like, this is too bad to keep going.
No. I eat all of my meals, even if I don't like it. But you know, I wanted to be prepared to discuss it, so I wanted to make sure I saw the whole thing. But if I had known that not completing it was an option, I may have taken it.
All right, Kat, where are you on this very long spectrum?
Okay, I loved this movie. I mean, I don't know if I loved this movie. I just thought it was good. I was like, I'm digging this. Maybe my expectations were so low. Perhaps like TMI personal background on this is that since we started dating, my boyfriend has been trying to get me to be as into Twin Peaks as he is. And I'm not. And there's a guy from Twin Peaks in this movie. So just like the fact that I was like, oh, I can't get away from Twin Peaks. Like there's some guy that's going to be in this movie. So maybe my expectations were really low. But also after we've been watching Johnny Mnemonic and these other 90s movies, I was like, honestly, the graphics are pretty good. She's got a point of view. I thought she had style. And I'm like, you know, I'm Googling while I'm watching the movie, and she was involved in all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I was like, okay, I see who this person is. There's as much nonsense to this movie as I think any of the other ones we've been watching, where it's like, they don't know what the internet is. They didn't consult anyone who works in computers, you know? But I felt like I would probably watch this movie again before I'd watch The Net again. And
I was thinking about the fact that, so Mike, we're like almost done with our cyberpunk season at this point, and so we've watched a lot of like 90s movies, and there is a part of me that's like, I feel like for Kat and I, it's on this spectrum of like what we've already engaged with,
totally,
and how like actually like solid the pacing was. And like it didn't leave me hanging in some ways, like other movies where you're like Johnny Mnemonic, you're like, what the fuck is happening? Why is this movie still on? Or like The Net, that had some pacing problems too. Yeah, so there might be some of that, but I do want to just like offer that, like, I do think that this movie is solid in terms of its structure. And I feel bad being like, well, maybe in comparison to other movies, you know?
Well, it's like every 10 minutes I was like, I'm following this. And that was like a big celebration. So like, maybe that is really damned by faint praise, but I was like, I actually get what they're saying is happening, where I could not say that with, I don't know, Existence or whatever else. Like,
it felt like, okay, so I watched it with a friend, and like, you know, it's a movie for me that you watch with people, and that is like a participatory experience.
Maybe that's right? Maybe that was my mistake. I didn't have any people.
I could harsh see light of solitude.
Totally. I could just see like sitting around by yourself and being like, wow, this is like, what? But the fact that you're like, oh my God, he's about to come out of the cable box, or, you know, or you're like, fucking look at that, like whatever, or like you're anticipating what the thing is going to be. And I think that there was something like fun about the, like, okay, what is it going to be next for me? Like, what, you know, where are we going to go with that? And so I don't know. I am sorry, I know I keep saying this. I'm so surprised at how much I actually sincerely enjoyed this movie because it's just so not my jam. But so let's get into it. I think that there's a number of interesting things happening in terms of like how technology exists in this. I think there's like representational stuff that is a big one. Like, you know that this
big
is
hip hop problem.
Yes. So like, and I'd love you to get into this because it starts with a shot of like the all-American family, and they're an all-American white, blue-eyed family because there's literally a pie and a baseball glove sitting on the fucking counter. And then you meet this kid who is just like super appropriating hip hop culture in just the most embarrassing ways.
It's really a lot. It's really a lot. Like I found myself looking to see who produced it because I was like, there has to be a record label attached to this somehow, or like this music is somebody's double dipping and getting money on the music side too, because none of these choices make any sense. Like this suburban child with his way too big jeans is listening to like the most rudimentary, generic, like I could not wrap my head around it. And to me, like that was the part that was to me like, oh, this is just all some big bit. This is all at somebody's amusement. And I couldn't understand it at all. I couldn't understand the choice.
I did have a moment when they were watching In Living Color later where I was like, was that on Fox? Because this was a Fox movie. Like I was trying to think how that connection was happening.
I looked up the soundtrack because I was like, this is, like literally the first time we hear rap music, it's literally Don't Call Me N-word.
Yes.
Whitey. Like it's so blatant and I don't aggressive in terms of like rap being aggressive, but just like no subtlety. It's really bizarre. And so I looked up the soundtrack and I was like, I don't recognize, like, not that I'm like a fucking, like, I don't know huge whatever. I just didn't I recognize so few names on the soundtrack, and it felt like could they not get the rights to music we would like that were bigger acts, or like
they were very obscure, weird songs. And that first moment, I think the protagonist is talking to her mother about how the son is doing, and you hear upstairs, "Don't call me nigger." Like that's not even a song. That's not a song. Like that is weird.
But so and in that song too, like it says like Whitey over and over, and I was like, is this supposed to be a commentary on the whiteness of this family in some ways? Like I don't even think it's that deep, but like why that choice,
I don't know.
And then he has a black friend, so like it makes it okay that
that's certainly
what
that character is about. That character's whole existence is to make this kid's obsession with hip hop make some sort of sense, but it still doesn't, because this kid would have punched him in real life. Like
well, and in that scene with Jessica Walter, the grandma, saying like, oh, how's my grandson doing? I suppose with the divorce or with the death of his father, unclear. And then once you hear the rap coming from upstairs, she's like, I can tell he's doing okay. Like it's used as the code of like, clearly this kid's not doing okay because look how baggy his pants are, which is like a through line joke. I would describe the kid aesthetically, for those of you who didn't pirate this movie to watch it, because I guess you could have rented it, but he looks like a member of the BK Kids Club from Burger King. Like that is like was my first thought. And there are like numerous moments where he's like pulling up his boxers and pulling and like tucking his shirt into them, pulling his jeans down. And it's very like, I mean, I think what's funny is a lot of these movies do that about tech. They're like, it's 1993. Like they're doing it mostly through this kid. And like, if the mom works around computers but will never understand them, like today's youth can play porn games or be exposed to rap music or whatever other things are like coded as being bad for kids.
I think part of his hip hop obsession too was meant to play as rebellion because his dad left, which is also strange. It's also very, very strange.
and just pinging another thing, Kat, like mentioning that this is 1993, it also feels like it's supposed to be like we are aware of the times, right? Like this is the sort of like mainstream commodification of rap culture, and so like obviously this kid would be like, sort of like we know what's happening in the world at this moment, right? Which is kind of what you were saying. I also, so like, okay, 1993, the technology in this is fucking hilarious. And I will say though that okay, one of my big problems with this type of cyberpunk, right? I think that there's like two big categories of cyberpunk. One is the like techno fear, right? Like technology is going to destroy us and ruin us, and it's the most dangerous, horrible thing that could ever happen. And the other side is like rebels who are using technology to overthrow the corporate elites or what have you. So I really struggle with the techno fear stuff because I don't like that. Even when I have to like comment on technology that's used to harass people, I'm just like, okay, but like technology is not bad. It's what we do with it, right? So in this movie, I think that there's some really weird, like prescient, like forward-looking elements of the way that technology harasses people. Like they literally swat them. Like swatting is a thing that happens today. It happens frequently to streamers, and it's when harassers will call the police and say that there is a kidnapping or some other kind of hostile activity, some crime happening in someone's house, so that they will send a SWAT team in to attack someone who's just streaming, and then it's all on camera. And so when they did that, I was like, okay, that like wasn't really a thing that was probably commonplace happening then, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that was a question or
I mean, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't really a thing that was happening then. So I just think it's interesting that as like one of a few examples in this that I was like, that's really interesting that they were like seeing that at the time.
I think that's what happens when we look back 30 years too, is like with tech in particular in movies. And like, I'm interested. I think that's one of the cool things about this season, and looking at like, how did Hollywood try to portray technology in the 90s, turn of the century, is like, it is both prescient to the point where you're like, oh yeah, some of this stuff is so commonplace today, but also there's elements of it that are like completely don't make any sense at all. Like, I was laughing my little butt off thinking about the Q-tips shoved in the electric socket and like where there's like band-aids and electrical tape. And by this point of the movie, I'm thinking like Rachel Talalay is like having fun. Like this is supposed to be a bit funny. But where it's just like, what do you think the internet is? Or like, how does electricity factor into this? Like, is everything a threat? I kept expecting. There's this horrible scene that I cannot wait to talk more about, where the rude dudes bribe the babysitter to show her bra.
Dude,
that was wild as hell.
I kept expecting like, I don't know, like a Tamagotchi to fall out and like hit them. I was like, what's gonna be the big like tech reveal? But that's what I enjoyed about this movie so much, is there's a lot of like tension build and then misdirect, which I thought was like a great horror B movie director doing this. I do want to also say about the boys and Karen Allen were all in the Sandlot the same year.
Oh wow.
And there's something about like talking about like it's the 90s and kids have baggy pants is like happening, and at the same time we're making movies like The Sandlot that are like, remember what if the past was different than what it was actually like? How about that? So I just felt like that was notable, that like these two kid actors, who probably with another 20 kid actors were all in the same movies, and Karen Allen too.
I don't remember The Sandlot at all.
Oh,
I know. I'm like, I feel
movie. That movie.
I feel like it's
one of those movies that lives in little boys' hearts, I think. It's like it was aimed at little boys. And it was romanticizing a past that could not have ever actually happened. But it was fun, and it had a giant imaginary dog and a lot of baseball. And I didn't recognize those two kids from that. But that babysitter scene, and in the entire like role of the babysitter, and how like Rude Dude. I'm gonna borrow Rude Dude. Rude Dude was trying to mac on her. Honestly, like, I didn't realize that the director of this movie was a woman until after it was over, and I looked it up, because there was so much stuff in here that I thought was just like a dumb dude did. And it kind of makes me, especially in the light of the way that you all are describing some of these things too, like, it makes me look at them in a different light. Because if she is having fun, then maybe it's satirizing some of those things in ways that I wasn't picking up on, because I was taking it very much on a surface level. I certainly wasn't thinking that there was much going on past that.
I don't think it was satirizing that in that moment. I think, one, in my old age, I've become a little more forgiving of media that has other things in it that I can appreciate, right? Like that, the whole babysitter scene was very troubling to me. Like, I did not like it. I think what this movie does well is it has a consistent tone that is like the cheesiness tone of it. That's not like, for me, it's not ramped up too high. Like, it's pretty fucking high, but it knows where it sits. And I think that of its time in some ways, in terms of, like, imagine being a female director in Hollywood in 1993, right? Like, how much can you really push back? And would you want to, right? Like, is it something that you even care about at that point? So I don't personally feel like that was sad. Like, I feel like that was very in line with who this kid is, because he's a piece of shit and annoying and we hate him. And, I don't know if we're supposed to think that. I think from our perspective, we're like, yo, kid, you've got problems.
He is a deeply unlikable child. And on an extreme for this type of movie, where a lot of the times, like, you talk about a movie like The Sandlot, like, you're rooting for all of these kids, even though some of them are jerks. Like, a lot of the media at the time, like, I feel like it was really easy to make a kid in that position very likable, especially if you felt like it was little boy against adults who don't care. And, it's an easy thing to position that kid as a super likable protagonist, but this kid is a jerk.
And he's very exaggerated, right? Like, as the character itself.
I am not a professional journalist, so you can excuse the fact that my research is not going past this first page of Wikipedia. But I was paywalled on this New York Times article called "Are Women Directors an Endangered Species?" from 1991. So before this movie, where apparently Talalay was quoted as saying that although she'd worked on the first 4 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, when she finally got to direct like the 5th or 6th one, notes from the studio said, "Don't be too girly or too sensitive." And, like, with the babysitter stuff, I had this thought that, like, if this was maybe an 80s movie, it would have been like the boys are peeping and her full tits are on display. Like, it would have been like even more gratuitous. And this is the small mercy I'm trying to like seek as like a feminist movie viewer. It's like, oh, she just had a bra on. That's nice. Isn't that nice? And she consented to this behavior, even though it's fucked up in 5 different ways.
I think the thing that was really striking for me about that scene, and what made it seem extra gratuitous, is that for a movie that does seem very driven by story beats, that scene had nothing to do with anything.
Totally.
Nothing to do with nothing.
Yeah, it's kind of character development for the kid, but I feel like it was pretty unnecessary. Like, yeah, that scene in particular. Yeah, it's gross. I'm thinking a little bit about like female directors of the 80s and 90s that like, had bigger hits. And I've been rewatching a lot of Catherine Bigelow's. So we're going to talk about Strange Days. And we talked about Near Dark earlier this year. And then Point Break is one of my all-time favorite movies. And like, there is, a sexualization and objectification in those films. And I think, Kat, like, your point is really interesting of like, I don't know any of these directors, and I don't know their politics and the choices. Well, Catherine Bigelow went and made that fucking pro-war bullshit, but other than that, like, what concessions did they have to make, right? And what ways were they made? Did they like manage things differently because of the system in which they're in and trying to get into, right? And I think that that's like worth reflecting on when engaging with films from, I mean, of any director of a marginalized background, even today, right? But especially in the past. I would like to talk about how Carl, also known as the address book killer, we need to talk about.
We have to talk about him a lot.
We have to talk about both the premise of an address book killer and also the technology around him becoming digitized and then corporeal again. I have to say, I'm skipping around, but like I wrote out every way that everyone died because those were my favorite parts of the movie. Like I think that that like anticipation of how we're getting to the death of all these people is really fascinating. But like he goes into an MRI, and after a address book was digitized, which also future technology that didn't exist at the time, that does now. I'm just pointing that out.
Let's back up. I want you to take it from the MRI, but he has been in a car accident in which his car flips upside down, slides on its roof through a graveyard, and he is cackling maniacally the whole time, like like very like I am a bad boy, and it is hilarious. So that's why.
And even before that, he works at the fucking computer like nerd house, and he's like lurking in the corner, just like staring and being like, I see that address book, you know?
And how many address books end up at the computer store?
Dude,
you gotta take it to Radio Shack to get it digitized or whatever. Okay, so now we're at the MRI, because please clarify this for me. I was a little bit like, then a thing happens. Now we're here.
That's it. There's no more to clarify.
So it was magic.
The MRI like hit with the fucking electricity in some way. And then it. And and then your brain's in the computer.
Was he corporeal at the end of the movie? Were those beans human beans or digi-beans?
Okay.
They had to be digi-magic.
I think they were the magnets. Or
but before the magnets, right?
So he becomes like a big swarm of worms or something.
Yeah, I know. They don't ever explain, as far as unless I was talking over it, because this was a raucous viewing.
You were also
experience
cackling maniacally.
Yeah. And to be fair, the end, I was like, okay, you could have like slowed your roll a little bit on the end, but also it wasn't as bad as some film endings that go on forever. Anyway,
I was just happy it was over.
You're like, this is the part. But so yeah, they didn't explain what he was made of and why like you couldn't really touch him, but he could touch you, right? Like I think but also like it doesn't matter, right? Like in this kind of movie, you're like, yeah, I'll buy it. You're made up of beans or whatever.
Well, right. And please.
No, I was going to say, there was one shot when he was being stretched apart as beans, where there were like little binary, little ones and zeros.
Yeah.
So
he's a computer
he's little information beans.
Yeah, yeah. Because there would be like kind of the green grid that we all understand to be the net. Question mark. And yeah, there is like such a great setup of like these set pieces, these death set pieces. Once we kind of get past the part where it's like her address book was stolen and now she's then we've got like the boss, the babysitter, the boyf date who works at the crash test dummy factory.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you forgot about that? That was like the fake out of all time. It was it was so beautiful.
It was honestly like, if I would show that scene to like a screenwriting class. And then I knew, I was like, there's got to be a big final set piece with the big bad, right? But like maybe it's a budget thing. I'm like, they could have made him a transformer of all sorts of little tech pieces. Like there would have been so many ways to do this cool, and instead I did think the entire like final sequence was a complete wash. But
I agree too. I think that the ways that the other three die are so good, and we're like, the practical effects in this are so good that the finale was a little lackluster. You're like, okay, whatever, Yeah. I'm so sad. You like this movie. You're just sitting here staring at us being like, I don't know why I'm wasting my time with all of you.
Look, it was one thing for me to have chosen the wrong movie. First mistake, okay? Because I really thought it was Ghost in the Shell at first. But that's fine, right? I picked what I picked. I ate my movie dinner. I watched it. The layer of existential crises I'm dealing with in this moment is I didn't imagine in a million years that either of you all would have watched it, let alone both of you.
Yeah, you're just out there on your own. Yeah. Okay.
Look, this is the show where our guest is critical of the movies that we love.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. The whole next season will just be like, everybody come tell us why what we love is bad. Okay, we keep talking about the way these people die. I want to talk about this just a little bit because there is such a fascinating aesthetic here, right? Like these kitchens are so, no, I'm serious. The production of these kitchens are,
okay.
Shut up, Mike.
No. I thought you were commenting on like the deadliness of the kitchens.
No.
I didn't realize like, it was the aesthetic.
So yeah. the boss guy has this very 50s retro stylized kitchen, and then the babysitter's house that she's in has a very like 80s modern kind of whatever. Like they're just
glass brick.
Very aesthetic, and it just fascinating to me. So the first guy, you're just like, you see him plug in his computer, and then you see Carl, the address book killer, like moving through. And it was so good how this was done because they didn't even need to use shitty bad CGI. They just had like camera running through cables, and you could immediately, and the movement of that, and like the cinematography of this movie is actually really good. And so you're like, oh my God, it's going to come out through the electricity. How's it going to happen? Oh my God, the microwave's on. Like that ramping of tension worked really well for me. And then you're like, oh, the fire's starting. Oh, and then like, you're like, oh, and then what's the next thing? The mustard container explodes. Then this explodes. And then the popcorn is going. And like
the bananas,
bananas
becoming irradiated or whatever. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. And you're like, none of this makes sense, but it's so visually appealing and so bombastic and over the top and ridiculous that you're like, sure, like I'm here for this. Like electricity cloud would do this in a kitchen. It wouldn't, but like I was here for it. And then the same like kind of ramping energy with the crash test dummy guy who you already know is going to die and you're excited because he's a dick. But the fake outs, right? You're like, he's going to get run over or he's going to die in the first one. Then he's going to get run over. And then he dies in the fucking bathroom with the hand dryer. All the ways to die. And I was like, kudos. Like that was so, to me, the tension ramping is done really, really well. The babysitter one was the one with the kid, right? And so like, that was the one that I was like, there's like knives literally everywhere in
listening.
This kitchen.
I want to give a shout out to that baby. I think that baby was the MVP of this movie because this was basically that first scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit with baby Huey or whatever. Like it's an acting baby in a cartoon. If you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I don't know, figure it out. But like where she's just like keeps looking and it's like, ooh, a sparkly knife, another sparkly knife, boiling milk, an oven. And I was like, this baby is like giving me the tension. That also I was like, this babysitter's just gonna die because she's an idiot, not because of like the address book killer. Also, for any of you who are visit the website doesthedogdie.com, there's another kind of protracted death scene that involves the main boy like trying to save his dog. That's pretty messed up.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah.
But similar tension of like this like pool cover is moving. Also, this is the most like this is shot in LA and it's supposed to be Cleveland in December or something where he's like jumping into the pool and they're just like walking around in shorts. And I was like, yeah, this is not Cleveland in December, but
was it supposed to be Cleveland or did you just pick a random city? Because I was like, at some point I was like, oh, did they ever say where this takes place?
Just I guess we could figure out where the TWA call center is, where you have to dress like a pilot (?) to answer calls about airplanes. they were all dressed like pilots. They had like the little Catholic school bows.
I thought she was a flight attendant at some point. I know that doesn't make any sense, but at some point I was like, why is she wearing a flight attendant uniform?
I just, and there is, this is like a great thing that happens in these movies, which was like when you could still sort of heroically declare that you're against technology, as you call like the techno fair, you'd have the character, the first thing she says is like, I'm around computers all day, don't understand them. And it's like, you got it. If that line was in a character's mouth today, you'd be like, oh, that's the killer. That's the you know.
Well, okay, so this is a good point that kind of transitions into something I was thinking about, is that there is a thing in here that I find very peculiar, and it is the family values lines. And so remember, this is 93. Bush won the election in 91 or lost the election in 91. No, he lost in 91. Oh, he won. Okay, sorry. Bush and Gore, not Gore. What is wrong with me right now? Quail. Anyways, whatever. His entire presidential platform was about family values. That was the whole fucking thing. And so that's when family values got really steeped into the American political conversation. And right, family values is obviously a cover for racism, right? And heteronormativity and whiteness and all that shit. And so her password is family values. Wow. And then at the very end, the killer says, I'm sick of family values crap. So like, this was confusing to me in terms of how huge of a term that was in politics and conservative politics at the moment, and what they're trying to say in this movie about it, or like, were there other things that were referencing this that got cut out, and so now these two things just like were left in there? Did anyone else pick up on this?
I didn't, but now that you say that, I mean, the idea of this kid's dad left and now he's some stark raving hip hop lunatic, that seems to be an extension of that as well, right? Like the movie itself seems to be pro family values in a way that's very oversimplified, and I think it's in a way that's meant to get the suburban viewer whose money they were going for to identify with this family, right? Like I because I just like, we couldn't identify necessarily what city this was in. I think this was supposed to be like suburbia USA.
Mm-hmm. So I was actually kind of wondering that about, like, there's a little bit of character development for Karen Allen when Bram, the good tech man,
the hacker who literally doesn't touch a computer, like doesn't do any hacking in this movie.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's understandable that he's not like, oh, all the electricity is possessed by a demon. Like, instead he's just like, we're gonna find out who this hacker is that's causing all these problems. Like, fair. So he shows up to help this woman and her kid, and by the way, that's the Twin Peaks guy. Yeah. And he finds information out about her, like that she protested Nixon by skinny dipping in the reflecting pool at the Washington Monument, and she was like arrested a couple of times in her youth. And I was like, oh, I wonder if these are just throwaways, like, we're just, again, like, is this part of the sense of humor of this movie that's just like, suburban mom, but guess what, she has like a bra burning past? Or was there more to it? Like, I didn't pick up on the family values password, but it does kind of make me think that this was perhaps on the cutting room floor, like more of a what happened when this like wild woman became a yuppie and now she like works, you know, I don't know, there could have been something there, but also like, I don't know, as much as I enjoyed this movie and would watch it again, I don't know that this movie had the infrastructure to support like any further commentary.
Well, it could have cut out all the fucking gross babysitter sexism and also the love corral porn.
Oh man.
Remember that, where this kid says, I call her butt an onion because it makes you cry. Yeah. And then the next scene is a shot of this like digital porn that like, where this character's like, would you like to remove my breast shield? Also, the VR was fucking great. Just
okay.
Their
Is that what VR is like?
Imposed? No. But their faces imposed on polygonal bodies, I thought was just such a move. It was just such a fucking techno like it was such a choice.
I am dying to see the like behind the scenes footage of after the killer, like, I don't know, like yanks him away in the VR, and then in the actual like VR place, he's just like falling out of the thing. I was like, did like a crew member just like yank that teenager out of this like Dance Revolution thing he's standing on? Because I mean, I feel like that was, again, better like realization of a tech thing than I've seen in bigger budget movies.
Speaking of realization, that's why, I mean, the sex bot scene, it read very true to me, because that was part of my experience on Earth when it was in high school and I got my first computer and it was in my room. I went and found all the little bad graphic sex stuff that one could find in 1994. So
sure,
that part read true. Gosh, there's so many points I want to make. One of them was that good hacker guy, Bram, the hero. I realized now part of the reason that I had trouble with this movie from the very beginning is because they tried to make that guy into a good guy. That guy is not a good guy. That guy in Twin Peaks is the scummiest man in a town where the head cheerleader gets murdered. So like I could not accept him as a protagonist. As soon as I saw his face, I'm like, of course he's the murderer. Of course he is. That guy.
I never watched Twin Peaks, so I feel like I didn't like I know that feeling when you see someone you've seen before and have a really strong attachment to that previous character. You're like, no, you can't be anyone.
See, unfortunately, I think this is why I'm having trouble enjoying Twin Peaks, is I feel that way every time Kyle MacLachlan is on screen. I'm like, this is a bad he did it. I've already found out who did it. I still think
my problem with that is that Kyle MacLachlan to me is from Sex and the City.
Yeah.
And so, because I never watched Twin
Showgirls.
Peaks. I don't remember Showgirls well enough to make that connection. So to me, he's just
one of the all-time sex scenes in the movie.
Yeah, sure. But I whenever I see like clips of Twin Peaks, I'm always like, oh, but that's the guy that what's her fuck Mary, whatever. Anyways, Mike said, oh, the kid and the porn and all that stuff. And like going to the arcade and whatever. I think it's interesting that we're all kind of like, this kid's Mike, I feel like you had the strongest reaction to him, but that like, he's like a fucking doofus, shitty teenage boy kid that isn't particularly sympathetic, but he has the most character development of anyone in this movie, right? Like he is such a primary character, which is fascinating because it's about a killer trying to kill everyone around this woman. So like, why is this kid so important?
I think he has a lot of screen time. I don't feel like he has a lot of development. I feel like he just gets more aspects of his assholeness exposed, but like he doesn't change much, like I didn't find him any more likable at the end of the movie than at the beginning. I just felt like he was a kid I never want to know in real life, but unfortunately there's plenty of them.
Fair, but I think it hit a spot for me where he like toned it down and was basically like hugged his mom and like was glad she wasn't dead, like there was a little bit of him like, I don't have to be a total asshole.
Right. So they had lowered the bar so much. All he had to do would say one nice thing to his mother. Nice thing. Yeah.
I think
fully.
He does have like, he has more actions to take. Like he goes from being just like, my number one interest is my computer's calling, it wants me, to like I'm gonna stay at grandma's and like light candles because we're in danger or whatever. But this begs the question. Now I'm someone who was heavily marketed to by Pogs in 1993.
I had Pogs. I had lots of Pogs.
But like a lot of promotional Pogs. I'm surprised I didn't own Pogs for this movie. I would have expected to see like your fave characters from Ghost in the Machine set of Pogs. But is this a kid's movie?
I think it could have been. I think
really?
It could have been. Yeah, I think with the
kid, define kid.
Like was this like a movie like The Sandlot, like for preteens.
I
Because
think it's
felt like it kind of was, because that kid was the most interesting character.
I think it's meant to appeal to both groups. And I think
Mhm.
it's because you have a very relatable female protagonist in suburbia USA, and you have this rude dude
Mhm.
kid that some kids would want to be like,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe. What was it rated? I doubt any of us know offhand. Anyways,
Probably
we'll look it up.
PG-13 or something. Probably. Just
Yeah.
because there's
It's gory.
computer
It was gory.
woman boobs.
The bubbling face.
Oh, that guy. That death
Before.
was awesome.
But yeah, I could see a 13-year-old being into this. Yeah. All right, y'all. We will be right back with some freakouts.
The Games and Online Harassment Hotline is a text message-based, anonymous, and confidential emotional support hotline. And it's created specifically for the gaming community. Because we're gamers and creators, and we want to help each other. So, how does it work? Well, you text us and we listen. Our hotline is 100% anonymous. We can talk about anything you need to, and only what you want to. The Games and Online Harassment Hotline is an inclusive resource for anyone, no matter how you identify. If you feel that you need emotional support, you can start right now by texting support to 23368, and our qualified responders will be there to listen to you, free of charge. Reach out, get help, and let's make this community a better place to work and play.
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past period of time. I need to change our script. Kat, what's going on with you?
I am still talking about the rude dude from this movie. First of all, I think I maybe have met the guy who played the kid in this movie. He has for many years been a professional martial artist and Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor.
Wow.
And we do have a mutual friend on Facebook in my former jiu-jitsu instructor. And I was just like, this guy's name is Will Horneff, and Will with one L sounds really familiar, but we're from opposite coasts. So maybe I'm just filling in the blanks here. But I did find an article about him from 2014 on a blog called Boomers, Beefcake, and Bonding that calls Will Horneff gay subtext teen idol of the 1990s. I just wanted to share this because I think that there are so many more gay subtext teen idols in the 90s that are like way more influential, gayer subtexter, teen or idoler than Will Horneff. But I appreciated this blog very much for just laying out like his 3 movies that he was like kind of in. And it ends with this conclusion. He's been married to a woman since 2008, so probably heterosexual, no word on whether he's gay positive or not. So thanks to this blog for being extremely decisive on the issue. That's my freak out.
I feel like I just entered a like fever dream. Like I almost don't even know what the fuck just happened.
I mean, I just appreciate like what can happen on a blog spot, and then you put it there, it's on the internet, you don't think about it again, and then some idiot reads it on a podcast however many years later. Look, this is technofear. This is why you should be afraid.
We definitely didn't think about the like long-term ramifications of the shit we were building on GeoCities sites back in the day, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of embarrassing Zangas.
Oh yeah,
around. Still there.
All right, Mike, what are you freaking out about?
Oh man, this week we all learned of the dissolution of comedy duo Desus and Mero, and I'm taking it hard. Like I think like culturally, it's a pretty big loss for people who are kind of like not corporate comedy, you know, like they're independent, they came up doing their own thing, they got a podcast that got really popular, and were able to parlay that into a television show on 2 different networks. And ultimately, like, not only was it like this cool space for comedy that was never like, it was always roasting something, but it was never like punching down, and it was also this really cool like interview show where they on their platform, they put a spotlight on so many different cool creators, and I'm also personally disappointed that I never got to be on it before it disappeared. So there's a little bit of that personal bitterness in there too. But I don't know, pouring a little invisible Henny out for Desus and Mero. I think they leave a cultural void behind. I hope the best for both of them, but I also hope that they do like a reunion at some point and get the party going again.
Did it end amicably, or was it kind of like some shit went down?
Yeah, and nobody really knows what happened, but it appears that they're going their separate ways. It's most likely something to do with money. But I as talented as they both are, I just think them as a unit means something. And I hope that they're able to get it together at some point down the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anita.
That's me.
What's your freak out?
So when I was a little punk child, I was obsessed with Tank Girl. And when I found out after watching this movie that Rachel Talalay, who directed Ghost in the Machine, also directed Tank Girl, I was like, yo, what the fuck? Like that just hit a spot. So I remember being a teenager and being so obsessed with Tank Girl and thinking that she was so cool, partly because I was like really like Lori Petty, who plays the same character over and over again. So much so that I like bought tube socks from Target and wore them on my arms. I made t-shirts with like white t-shirts and just wrote Sharpie on that, like Sharpie stuff on them, like Mudhoney's song "Touch Me, I'm Sick." I had a t-shirt that said that. Just really like the sort of like fuck the establishment punk rock aesthetic of Tank Girl. It was coded into my DNA when I was a kid. So I rewatched it last night for the first time I think since I was a teenager.
Oh no.
Yeah. Okay. So I was like hyped when it started because I was like, oh my God, I remember this and that. And like, of course I would love this. Is it like as a teenager, like this would be my jam. And she like, just, it's so visual and aesthetic and just like grimy. But like, she's got like a weird shaved head, but not, and like all these weird clothes and like, they live in this like commune that's separated from like the mainstream, like just everything about it. But like the movie's really long, like it drags. And I was really like partway through, like near, definitely the third act of it. I was just like, oh my God, when is this movie gonna fucking end? Like the shock and the aesthetic of it really is where wore out me. And so I'm having this feeling of like revisiting the things that I love and them not nesting and like situating like the puzzle piece that they are. There's some representation issues in the movie that are troubling. But overall, I like the soundtrack is amazing. And it was clearly all the bands that I used to listen to when at that time as well. And like, I really appreciate it for what it is. And like, I can see how she made both of these movies because they're both very well defined in what they are. And also I think that Tank Girl, like as a comic book movie, uses comic book elements really well. And I think that sometimes that can be done pretty badly, right? So there's a interplay between actual comic pages and the movie. And the whole time I was watching it, I was like, man, I wish superhero movies today would take note, like that, like it's got no one's taking themselves too seriously, right? It's I'm tired of the Marvel, like, we're so serious all the time. And the Batmans that are just like so serious all the time, that when I see things like this, I'm like, yes, like, let's have more of this, please. So that's my complicated, messy feelings about Tank Girl.
So just so we have it on record, are we saying Tank Girl is better or worse than Ghost in the Machine?
I don't want to put that on record. Okay, I will answer this question. I mean, I'm not going to answer this question with an exact, but I think Ghost in the Machine is more of a solid film from beginning to end. I think the pacing of it is really good. I don't love the themes of Ghost in the Machine. I think Tank Girl has themes that I can super get behind and has like an aesthetic that just like speaks to me, but like the pacing of it isn't as good and it starts to really drag in ways that I'm like, this is a bummer. And it's also really rapey. Like I was kind of, I forgot, I either was not clued in enough.
Right.
Also having just watched Strange Days recently too, which again, we'll talk about, I was like, God, all this media in the 90s was just like low/high key, like rapey as just like character development or just as like set dressing in a way that I don't think I was aware of as a kid. And now as an adult, I'm like really kind of horrified at just how like in the background it is. And so in Tank Girl, there was quite a bit of that in ways that I was like, this doesn't feel good, so whatever, Tank Girl forever.
Yeah, maybe I won't revisit that. That's a movie whose aesthetic I remember. My sister's 10 years older than me. So like when I was a little kid in the early 90s, I was absorbing a lot of what my like cool teen sister was watching, which is why I feel like I have an affinity for that without remembering really anything about the movie. So I'm like, oh, should I just keep it like that and not rewatch it as a adult person? But
just watch the first 20 minutes and then you'll
maybe
get what you need out of it.
Yeah, I'll read the comic and like see how that feels.
As a person whose therapy journey has led them to a place where I watch a lot of movies that I used to love in order to help me feel my feelings. It's a swing and a miss a lot of times.
Yeah.
Swing and a miss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's honestly like a interesting theme maybe for a season of this show. Well, that is our show for today. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Where do you want people to listen to you, find you, or leave you alone respectfully?
MikeEagle.net is my internet hub for all of my stuff. If you want to listen to the podcast or the music or anything, you can find pathways to it all from there. And I tend to be on Twitter at Mike_.eagle saying random things.
I am Anita Sarkeesian, and you can find me at Anita Sarkeesian on all the things.
I'm Kat Spada, and I am on Twitter at @Kat_EX_Machina. And you can follow Feminist Frequency on all of the things at FemFreak with a Q.
If you are a Patreon subscriber, be sure to stick around for the bonus episode with our guest, Mike Eagle.
If you like our show, please help other people find it. Subscribe, rate, and comment on your favorite podcatcher.
Thanks so much
for listening.
Bye.